People don't often say this out loud, but there is a subtle and almost unspoken way of engaging with a woman that awakens something deeply instinctive within her. It has nothing to do with forced romance or scripted modern gestures. Instead, it comes from a rare kind of presence, a man who doesn't beg, who stays composed under pressure, and who doesn't build his entire world around her. This steady, grounded and self-reliant energy is what stays in a woman's thoughts long after he's gone. Even though it's rarely acknowledged, this is the kind of dynamic many women are quietly drawn to. Not as fragile storybook characters and not as distant modern ideals, but as individuals who naturally respond to a strong masculine presence they cannot fully control, a man who doesn't chase attention, who doesn't constantly explain himself, and who doesn't reshape who he is just to be accepted. In today's environment, many men come across as overly anxious, emotionally fragile, or predictable, so when someone different appears, it leaves a clear impression. Even if it's never spoken, even if modern narratives promote constant reassurance and emotional softness, there is still a deeper response to something else entirely. A response to the man who remains calm, who doesn't depend on validation, and who is fully comfortable in his own identity. This is the part that rarely gets explained. A woman keeps thinking about the man she couldn't fully understand, the one who didn't reveal everything about himself right away, who didn't chase her every time she created distance or uncertainty. Predictability makes someone easy to forget. Repeated patterns lose their effect quickly. Once boredom sets in, attraction starts to fade, and predictable men become just another familiar experience. It's hard for people to accept this because it challenges the idea that attraction always follows logic or social expectations. In reality, attraction is often emotional, unpredictable, and deeply genuine. It doesn't follow strict rules. It simply exists, and many women are drawn to a man who acts as though he doesn't rely on them for his identity. Not because he's distant or careless, but because he already has purpose and direction. What can't be fully controlled becomes interesting. It sparks curiosity. It creates a desire to understand, to explore, and to connect more deeply. Not through manipulation, but because attraction naturally works this way. A woman doesn't just want to be chosen, she also wants to feel like she's choosing, like she's earning the attention of someone who holds real value. Modern culture has encouraged many men to be overly accommodating, constantly seeking approval and shrinking themselves so they're never seen as too much. They learn to move carefully, avoid criticism, and make sure they're always accepted. At the same time, many women quietly become tired of this pattern. They may not say it directly, but internally there can be a sense of dissatisfaction. They may seem distant or emotionally unavailable, not because they lack connection, but because the interaction lacks depth. Real impact happens when a man doesn't give everything immediately, when he doesn't respond instantly every time, when he doesn't reveal his entire emotional world within moments, when he doesn't make a woman the center of his entire existence. Instead, he lives his life fully and allows her to decide if she naturally fits into it. That's where the real shift occurs. A woman respects a man who already has his own world. She might resist it at first or feel uncertain about it, but deep down she recognizes its importance, and in her mind, respect is what eventually turns into attraction. Everything else comes after. There's also something rarely discussed openly. A woman is often drawn to the man who creates a sense of internal curiosity within her, the one who makes her wonder, why is he different? Why doesn't he act like the others? Why does he seem unaffected? These thoughts don't disappear quickly. They stay, building a kind of fascination over time. The more she tries to understand him, the more engaged she becomes, because there's never a simple or complete answer. The man who remains somewhat unknown becomes memorable. He becomes the standard she compares others to, often without even realizing it. But many men misunderstand this idea. They think it requires arrogance or coldness. It doesn't. It's much more subtle. It shows through composure, through meaningful silence, through a calm presence that neither tries to dominate nor submit. It's not about being harsh. It's about controlled distance. A quiet message that says, without words, I notice you, but I'm not dependent on you. That alone can shift how she sees both herself and others. On a deeper level, there is a truth that people rarely acknowledge. Women don't always want complete emotional certainty right away. They appreciate space, anticipation, and even small moments of uncertainty. The pause between interactions, the space that allows thoughts to develop, the sense that there is still more to discover. When a man is always available, always explaining, always offering attention without limits, his presence becomes predictable, and predictability often lowers perceived value. This isn't about being unkind. It's a natural reaction. Easy access doesn't create lasting meaning. Without tension, there is no depth to sustain attraction. A woman wants to feel like she has gained something meaningful, not something that was always there without effort. That's why balance matters. A man who is neither distant nor overly dependent, who can connect without losing himself, who can step back without disappearing completely. This creates a dynamic that feels real and engaging. Natural space, not as a tactic, but as a result of living a full life, allows curiosity to grow. When that space exists, thoughts begin to develop, imagination becomes active, and that's where emotional connection deepens. When he returns, his presence feels more meaningful because it wasn't constant or predictable. A woman values what she cannot fully possess. And this doesn't require pretending, it requires authenticity. A man with purpose, direction, and focus naturally creates this effect. He doesn't need to perform or seek approval. His confidence is quiet, but it's clear. There is also a subtle form of testing that happens, often without intention, not out of negativity, but as a way of understanding the other person. A woman may watch how a man reacts under pressure, how he handles distance, how he responds to emotional shifts. If he becomes unstable, overly reactive, or constantly seeks reassurance, it shows a lack of grounding. But if he remains calm, steady, and unaffected by small changes, it creates interest. Stability becomes attractive. The man who holds his center, regardless of what's happening around him, becomes someone she remembers. At its core, this dynamic is built on perceived value. A woman tends to value what she feels she could lose. If everything is given freely without boundaries, that sense of importance fades. Emotional connection needs movement, discovery, and a sense of progression. When everything's revealed too quickly, the mystery disappears. And without mystery, there is little left to explore. Mental strength, more than physical appearance or material success, leaves a lasting impression. It's the ability to stay calm, maintain identity, and remain grounded no matter the situation. This creates a form of emotional security that is deeply appealing. Seeking constant approval often creates the opposite effect. When a man always looks for validation, it signals insecurity. It shows that his sense of worth depends on external acceptance, and that reduces attraction. Kindness and care still matter, but they lose their impact when they come from fear instead of confidence. Real attraction is built on presence, self-respect, and authenticity. A man who understands his value doesn't need to constantly prove it. He naturally reflects it through how he lives. In the end, the pattern becomes clear. A woman is drawn to emotional impact, not just logical consistency, and emotional impact comes from authenticity, from strength, from a presence that isn't easily influenced or controlled. It's not about manipulation or strategy, it's about alignment with who you truly are. A man who lives with purpose, who stays committed to his path, and who doesn't abandon himself for approval, naturally becomes more compelling. There is also a subtle moment when everything shifts. It happens when a woman realizes that a man is willing to walk away if needed, not as a threat, but as a reflection of self-respect. That realization changes the dynamic completely. It creates a deeper level of respect, and with that respect comes stronger emotional engagement. Because ultimately, the most powerful dynamic is simple. A woman wants to feel chosen, but by someone who doesn't need to choose anyone. That balance between independence and genuine interest is what creates lasting impact. And this leads to the final, unspoken truth. A woman is not truly drawn to a man who revolves entirely around her. She's drawn to the man who continues to live, grow, and move forward regardless of her presence. A man who doesn't lose himself in connection. A man who remains complete, grounded, and confident. Because in that presence, she experiences something rare. Not control, not dependency, but a sense of strength that allows her to feel both challenged and secure at the same time. That is the quiet reality of attraction, the part that is rarely explained, but always felt.